My name is Carol, 58 years old, a widow for 3 years now. After selling my house, I moved in with my daughter Emily and her husband Jordan to help care for their 5-year-old Madison. Things started well enough, but over time, their attitudes changed. What began as occasional favors turned into endless demands, especially from Jordan. Yesterday, Emily delivered her ultimatum: serve her husband or leave their home. If you are watching this video right now, please let me know where you are viewing from and hit like if you have ever faced an impossible situation with family members who took advantage of your kindness. The decision to sell my home and move in with Emily was not an easy one. I had shared that house with my husband Frank for 32 wonderful years. We had built a life there, raised our daughter in those rooms, celebrated countless holidays, and weathered life's storms together under that roof. When Frank died suddenly from a heart attack 3 years ago, that house became both my comfort and my prison. Every room held memories of him, from the kitchen, where he would surprise me with breakfast on Sunday mornings, to the garden where he would spend hours tending to his prized tomatoes. For months after his passing, I found myself talking to him in empty rooms. I would make 2 cups of coffee in the morning out of habit, only to stare at his untouched mug until it went cold. The silence was deafening. Our neighbors were kind, bringing casseroles and offering help with yard work, but nothing could fill the Frank-shaped void in my life and home. It was during one of my daughter Emily's visits that she first suggested I sell the house and move in with her family. She was 35, married to Jordan for 7 years, with their sweet 5-year-old daughter Madison. They lived in a spacious 4-bedroom home about 30 minutes away from me. "Mom, that house is too big for just you," Emily said, helping me wash dishes after dinner. "And honestly, we could use your help with Madison. With both Jordan and me working full-time, childcare is killing us financially." I hesitated, running my fingers over the countertop Frank had installed himself. "I just don't know if I can leave all this behind." "Think about it," she urged. "You could have your own space at our place. The guest room is plenty big, and you already adore Madison. Plus, you would be doing us such a huge favor. Jordan and I barely have any time for ourselves anymore." Over the next few weeks, Emily continued making her case. We discussed the financial aspects too. I would contribute to their mortgage from my house sale proceeds, essentially buying my way into their home. In return, I would help with Madison after school and handle some household chores. It seemed reasonable. I would maintain my part-time position at the local library where I had worked for the past decade, giving me some independence and my own income. "Just think about it, Mum," Emily said during one of our phone calls. "Madison asks about you all the time. She would be thrilled to have her grandma around every day." That was the argument that finally convinced me. The thought of being a daily presence in my granddaughter's life rather than just a weekend visitor was powerfully appealing. After Frank died, I had thrown myself into being the best grandmother I could be, trying to fill the emptiness with Madison's infectious laughter and curiosity. The process of selling the house was emotionally grueling. Each room had to be cleared of 32 years of accumulated life. I sorted through Frank's clothes, finally donating most of them while keeping just a few treasured items. His favorite flannel shirt, the sweater I had given him our last Christmas together, the baseball cap he wore every summer. When potential buyers walked through the house, I felt like they were intruding on sacred ground. How could they possibly understand the love that had saturated those walls? The real estate agent kept telling me to depersonalize the space, to remove family photos and personal touches. With each item I packed away, I felt like I was erasing pieces of my history with Frank. The house sold quickly for more than I had expected. The housing market was hot, and apparently my little 3-bedroom ranch with the carefully tended garden was exactly what young families were looking for. The closing was scheduled, papers were signed, and suddenly I was facing my last night in the home where I had expected to grow old with Frank. I spent that final evening walking through each empty room saying goodbye. In our bedroom, I sat on the floor where our bed had been and whispered to Frank, "I hope you understand why I am doing this. I need to be closer to family now. I need to feel useful again." The day I moved into Emily and Jordan's home was filled with optimism. Emily had prepared the guest room beautifully with fresh flowers and new bedding. Madison was bouncing with excitement, eager to show me where she had carefully arranged my books on the shelves. Jordan was polite but reserved, helping carry my boxes and suitcases, but saying little. "This is going to work out wonderfully for everyone," Emily assured me as she helped me unpack. "Madison is beyond excited, and Jordan and I will finally get some breathing room. Plus, you will not be alone in that big empty house anymore." As I arranged my few remaining personal items in my new room, I felt a mix of grief for what I had left behind and hope for what lay ahead. I placed a photo of Frank on the nightstand and whispered, "Well, here we are at the start of something new." I had no way of knowing then how quickly that optimism would fade, or the harsh reality that awaited me in what I had believed would be my safe harbor during my later years. The first 2 months at Emily and Jordan's home were genuinely wonderful. Madison and I developed a beautiful routine together. Each afternoon when she returned from kindergarten, we would spend time reading books or doing simple craft projects I had prepared. Her favorite activity was baking, and I taught her how to make my mother's famous chocolate chip cookies, just as I had taught Emily when she was small. "Grandma, you make everything more fun," Madison told me one afternoon as we rolled cookie dough together, her small hands covered in flour. Her earnest blue eyes, so much like Emily's at that age, looked up at me with pure adoration. Emily seemed genuinely grateful for my help during those early days. She would come home from her job as a marketing executive, kick off her heels, and sigh with relief when she saw dinner prepared and Madison happily engaged in an activity. "Mum, I do not know how we managed before you came," she admitted one evening, accepting a glass of wine I had poured for her. "Just not having to worry about rushing to pick up Madison or figuring out dinner has made our lives so much easier." Jordan, a financial analyst at a large firm, was cordial but distant at first. He would acknowledge my presence with a brief nod or quick hello before retreating to his home office or the living room to watch sports on their large television. He rarely engaged in conversation with me, but he was not unkind. I chalked it up to him simply being a reserved person who needed time to adjust to having his mother-in-law living in his home. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. About 10 weeks after I moved in, I noticed Jordan had begun leaving his breakfast dishes in the sink rather than placing them in the dishwasher as he had done previously. At first, I thought nothing of it. Everyone has busy mornings occasionally. I simply washed his cereal bowl and coffee mug along with my own. But soon it became a pattern. His dirty dishes began appearing not just at breakfast, but after late-night snacks. Clothes that he had previously put in the hamper were now left on the bathroom floor. The behavior seemed deliberate, as though he was testing boundaries. One evening, when Emily and I were alone in the kitchen, I casually mentioned it. "I noticed Jordan has been leaving his dishes out lately. Is everything okay? Is work particularly stressful for him right now?" Emily's expression tightened slightly. "Jordan works really hard, Mum. He has a lot of pressure at the office. The least we can do is make sure he feels comfortable and taken care of at home." "Of course," I said carefully. "I was just wondering if there was something specific bothering him. He just needs to be able to relax when he is home." Emily continued, her tone slightly defensive. "He likes things a certain way, and now that you are here to help, it takes some pressure off both of us." I nodded, not wanting to create tension. After all, I was grateful to be living with my family, and if washing a few extra dishes made things run more smoothly, it seemed a small price to pay. But Jordan's expectations expanded steadily. Within another month, he was not just leaving dishes, but making specific requests. He liked his work shirts ironed a particular way. His breakfast eggs needed to be prepared just so, with the yolks runny, but the whites fully set. His coffee needed to be ready the moment he came downstairs in the morning. "Carol, do you mind making sure my blue shirt is ironed for tomorrow's client meeting?" he asked one evening, not looking up from his phone as he spoke to me. Not, "Would you please?" or "If you have time." Just an expectation that I would do it. What troubled me more than Jordan's growing demands was Emily's transformation. My once independent, strong-willed daughter had become deferential around her husband, constantly anticipating his needs and wants. She would jump up from the dinner table to refill his water glass before he even asked. She would quickly shush Madison if her playing became too noisy while Jordan was watching television. "Since when does Emily wait on Jordan hand and foot?" I asked my friend Sarah during one of our weekly phone calls. Sarah had known Emily since she was a teenager and had been my confidant through the years. "Some men just expect that kind of treatment," Sarah replied. "Has he always been this way?" I thought back to the early days of Emily and Jordan's relationship. No, or at least I never noticed it. They seemed like equal partners. Emily was always so proudly independent, just like I raised her to be. One particularly revealing moment came when I overheard them in their bedroom. Their door was ajar, and as I passed with a basket of laundry, I heard Jordan say, "Your mother left streaks on my car when she washed it yesterday." "I will speak to her," Emily replied quickly. "She probably just used the wrong cloth." "Make sure you do," he responded. "And remind her that I like the wax applied in circular motions, not back and forth." I stood frozen in the hallway laundry basket in my arms. When had I gone from being Emily's mother to being the household help? More importantly, when had my daughter become someone who would promise to speak to her mother about car washing techniques as though I were a misbehaving employee? That night I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The photograph of Frank seemed to look back at me with concern. "What would you think of all this?" I whispered to him in the darkness. "What would you tell me to do?" As the days passed, I began to see that the warm family environment I had envisioned when selling my home had been replaced by something very different. I had unwittingly stepped into a household with unhealthy dynamics that were now expanding to include me in an unexpected and troubling role. 4 months into my stay with Emily and Jordan, the situation deteriorated dramatically. What had begun as occasional requests had morphed into constant criticism of how I performed household tasks that I had never agreed to take on in the first place. One Tuesday evening, I prepared a lasagna for dinner using the same recipe I had made for our family for decades. Emily had always loved it as a child, requesting it for her birthday dinners. I set the table, called everyone to eat, and served the portions. Jordan took one bite, frowned, and put his fork down. "This is way too garlicky," he announced, pushing his plate away. "And the noodles are overcooked." I felt my cheeks grow warm. "I am sorry you do not care for it. I can make you something else if you would like." "No," he said with a sigh that suggested infinite patience being tested. "Just remember for next time that I prefer my pasta al dente and easy on the garlic. Emily knows how I like things." I glanced at Emily, expecting her to at least mention that this was her childhood favorite recipe, unchanged for 20 years. Instead, she quickly stood up. "Let me make you something else, honey. How about a sandwich?" Madison looked back and forth between the adults, her small forehead wrinkled in confusion. "But I like Grandma's lasagna," she said quietly. "It is yummy." "Well, you can enjoy it, sweetheart," Jordan replied, his voice suddenly gentle with his daughter while remaining dismissive of me. "Grown-ups have more developed taste buds." Later that night, I tried to speak with Emily privately. I found her in the master bathroom applying her night cream. "Emily, can we talk about what happened at dinner?" I asked. "What about it?" She continued her skincare routine without looking at me. I felt a bit undermined. The lasagna recipe has not changed since you were a child. You used to love it. Emily finally turned to face me. Mum, you need to understand that Jordan is particular about food. He works hard all day dealing with difficult clients. The least we can do is make sure his meals are prepared the way he likes them. But the way you jumped up to make him a sandwich, I persisted. You did not even defend me or the meal. Defend you? Emily looked genuinely confused. From what Jordan just stated his preference, why make it into a big deal? I realized then that Emily could not even see how her behavior had changed. In her mind, catering to Jordan's every whim was simply what a good wife did. My independent daughter had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. The next major conflict arose when Jordan began commenting on my work schedule at the library. I had maintained my part-time position, working 3 mornings a week. The job was not just about income. It gave me purpose, social connection, and a sense of identity beyond being a grandmother and household helper. Carol, we need to discuss your library schedule, Jordan said one evening as I cleared the dinner dishes. It is becoming inconvenient for our family routine. I placed the stack of plates on the counter. In what way I am always back in time to pick up Madison from school? Yes, but Emily had to take her to her doctor's appointment last week because you were working, and I sometimes need to schedule client breakfasts on weekday mornings. It would be helpful if you were more flexible. Jordan, we discussed my continued employment before I moved in, I reminded him. It is important to me. Things change, he said with a shrug. Families need to adapt. Now that you are living here, your priority should be supporting this household. I stood my ground. I am happy to help with Madison and contribute to the household, but my job at the library is non-negotiable. Jordan's expression hardened. We will see about that, he said before walking away. That night, I heard him speaking to Emily in hushed but forceful tones. The next morning, Emily approached me as I prepared for work. Mum, she began hesitantly. Jordan and I were talking, and we really do need more help with Madison. The library job is nice, but is it really necessary at your age? At my age, I repeated, stunned by her words. I am 58, not 80. And yes, it is necessary for my well-being. Emily sighed, clearly frustrated that I was not immediately acquiescing, as she now did, to all of Jordan's demands. Just think about it, okay, for the family's sake. Perhaps the most alarming development came when I realized I was being excluded from financial decisions, despite my significant contribution to their household. I had put $150,000 from my house sale into their mortgage, effectively purchasing a stake in their home. We had drawn up a legal agreement with a lawyer, specifying that this granted me lifetime residency rights. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find Emily and Jordan at the kitchen table, with brochures for new SUVs spread out before them. What are you looking at? I asked, pouring myself a cup of coffee. We are upgrading my car, Jordan answered without looking up. The Lexus RX has all the features we need. Emily nodded enthusiastically. It has a great safety rating for families. I sat down at the table. That looks expensive. Is this a good time for such a large purchase? Jordan looked up, his expression cool. We have it covered. Well, I said carefully, since I contributed to the household finances, I would appreciate being included in major purchase discussions. Your contribution was to the house, Jordan said dismissively. That is separate from our other financial decisions. But large purchases affect the overall family budget, I pointed out. If money gets tight, it impacts everyone. Jordan's jaw tightened. With all due respect, Carol, Emily, and I manage our finances. Your role here is to help with Madison and the household, not to offer financial advice. I looked to Emily, hoping she would support me. Instead, She avoided my gaze and quickly changed the subject. Mum, did you see that Madison needs cupcakes for her class party on Tuesday? That evening, as I folded laundry in my room, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. There were new lines around my eyes and mouth that had not been there 6 months ago. I looked tired, defeated. What happened to you, Carol? I whispered to my reflection. When did you become the unpaid housekeeper instead of the respected mother and grandmother? The truth was becoming painfully clear. Despite my financial contribution and our original agreement, I was being treated as a servant in a home I had helped pay for. Even worse, my daughter was complicit in this treatment. Whatever dynamic existed between Emily and Jordan had expanded to position me at the bottom of the household hierarchy. The loving family arrangement I had envisioned when selling my home of 32 years had turned into something I never could have imagined. The Sunday morning that changed everything began like any other. I woke early, as was my habit, and quietly made my way to the kitchen to brew coffee. The house was silent. Emily and Jordan typically slept late on weekends, while Madison would not stir until around 8. I had plans that day to meet Sarah for lunch at a new restaurant downtown. We had been planning this outing for weeks, and I was looking forward to a few hours of normalcy away from the increasingly tense household. I had mentioned these plans to Emily days ago, and she had seemed fine with it, assuring me that she and Jordan could handle Madison for the afternoon. As I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee enjoying the peace of early morning, Jordan appeared in the doorway. His expression was thunderous, still in his pajamas, but clearly agitated. "Where are my blue dress shirts?" he demanded without preamble. I looked up from my coffee, momentarily confused. "Good morning to you too, Jordan." "My shirts," he repeated, his tone sharpening. "I need the light blue one for a golf meeting with clients today. It should have been ironed and hanging in my closet." I took a deliberate sip of my coffee before answering. "I put a load of laundry through yesterday, but I have not ironed anything yet. I was planning to do that tomorrow since I'm going out today." Jordan stared at me as though I had announced I was planning to set the house on fire. "Going out? What do you mean, going out?" "I am having lunch with Sarah today," I explained calmly. "I mentioned it to Emily earlier this week." "Well, that is not going to work," Jordan stated flatly. "I need those shirts ironed before I leave at 11, and Emily has a migraine, so you will need to watch Madison." I placed my coffee mug down carefully. "Jordan, I made these plans weeks ago. I am sorry about Emily's migraine, but perhaps you could watch Madison while I am gone for a couple of hours." He looked at me as though I had suggested something entirely unreasonable. "I just told you I have an important meeting with clients. This could lead to a major account for my firm." "And I have important plans too," I countered, feeling a rare flare of assertion rising within me. For months, I had been accommodating conciliatory walking on eggshells to keep the peace. But something about this morning, perhaps the accumulation of all the small indignities, had finally lit a spark of resistance. "Your lunch with a friend is not the same as my business meeting," Jordan scoffed. "This is my career we are talking about, and this is my life we are talking about." I replied, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. "I have given up my home and contributed financially to this household. I help with Madison and with housework beyond what we originally discussed. But I am still entitled to a few hours of personal time." Jordan's face reddened. He was not accustomed to being challenged, especially not in his own home, and particularly not by his mother-in-law. Before he could respond, Emily appeared in the doorway wearing a robe and looking pale. "What is going on? Why are you two arguing so loudly?" she asked, wincing slightly as though the sound hurt her head. "Your mother is refusing to iron my shirts or watch Madison because she has a lunch date." Jordan announced, his tone making my plans sound frivolous and selfish. Emily turned to me, her expression a mix of pain and disbelief. "Mom, you know how important Jordan's client meetings are, and I really do not feel well today." "I understand that, Emily," I said gently. "But I made these plans weeks ago, and I have been looking forward to them. Surely we can figure out a solution that works for everyone." "What solution?" Jordan interjected. "I have to golf with these clients. Emily is sick. Madison needs supervision. You are here supposedly to help the family, yet you are prioritizing lunch with a friend." "I am here to be part of this family," I corrected him. "Not to be at your beck and call. There is a difference." Emily stepped further into the kitchen, her body language defensive. "Mum, when you moved in, you agreed to help with Madison and contribute to the household. That is what family does." "Yes, I agreed to help," I acknowledged. "But I never agreed to give up my autonomy or to be treated like household staff. I am your mother, Emily, not your employee." "That is not fair," Emily protested. "We have given you a home here." "A home that I helped pay for," I reminded her. $150,000 from the sale of the house your father and I owned for 32 years. The house where I raised you." Jordan crossed his arms, his patience visibly evaporating. "Let me make this very simple," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Either you accept your role in this household and the responsibilities that come with it, or perhaps this living arrangement is not working out." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Was he threatening to throw me out? I looked to Emily, expecting her to object to such an ultimatum directed at her mother. Instead, she stood silently beside her husband, her expression torn, but her position clear. "Jordan is right, Mum," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Either you need to accept your role here and support our family the way we need, especially Jordan, or maybe you should consider other living arrangements." The kitchen fell silent. In that moment, I felt as though I was seeing my daughter truly clearly for the first time in months. The Emily I had raised, the strong, independent young woman who had once insisted on equality in all her relationships, had disappeared. In her place stood someone who had surrendered her own identity to become an extension of her husband's demands. Jordan broke the silence with a triumphant smirk. "Besides, you have already given us your contribution from selling your house. That money has been put to good use." The cruelty of his statement, the naked acknowledgement that they had my money and now found my presence inconvenient, sent a cold shock through my system. I might have continued arguing, might have reminded them of our legal agreement, might have appealed once more to my daughter's better nature. But at that moment, Madison appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily, her favorite stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She looked at the three adults standing rigidly in the kitchen, sensing the tension even at 5 years old. "Why is everyone mad?" she asked in a small voice. Her eyes found mine wide and confused, and I saw fear there too. Fear that the grown-ups she trusted were breaking something important. And in that moment, looking into my granddaughter's innocent eyes, I made my decision. There is a clarity that comes with moments of crisis, a sudden parting of mental clouds that reveals the path forward with perfect precision. As I looked at Madison's frightened face, that clarity descended upon me like a cool, calming rain. This was not just about me anymore. This was about what Madison was learning about relationships, about how women should be treated, about what she was absorbing from watching her mother's subservience and her father's dominance. What kind of future was I helping to shape for her if I continued to enable this toxic dynamic? I smiled at Madison first, making my voice gentle and reassuring. "No one is mad, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just have different ideas about things, and we need to talk about them." Then I turned back to Emily and Jordan, the smile still on my face, but my eyes now steady and resolved. I will not be serving anyone today, and I will not argue about this further. Jordan's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Emily's mouth opened slightly, clearly not expecting this calm response, rather than continued pleading or anger. I will be upstairs for a few minutes. I continued, my voice surprisingly steady. Madison, would you like some breakfast while I'm gone? I can pour you some cereal before I go up. The little girl nodded, still clutching her rabbit. I poured her cereal, then milk, gave her a kiss on the top of her head, and walked past my stunned daughter and her husband without another glance. In my room, I pulled out the small suitcase I had deliberately kept accessible in the back of my closet. Some part of me had anticipated this moment, had sensed the deteriorating situation, and prepared for a quick departure if necessary. I had not wanted to acknowledge that possibility, had hoped things would improve, but my subconscious had been more realistic than my conscious mind. I packed efficiently, taking only what was truly mine, and truly necessary clothing, toiletries. My few remaining pieces of jewelry, important documents, and the photograph of Frank from my nightstand. I left behind all the household items I had purchased since moving in: the new bedding, the small television, the comfortable reading chair. Those had been bought to contribute to a home I had believed in, and they could remain as my parting gift. Before leaving my room, I took a small notebook from my desk and wrote a brief note. In it, I included just the essential information: the name and contact information of my attorney, who held the paperwork regarding my financial contribution to the house, a reminder that our agreement included lifetime residency rights that they had now violated, and a simple statement that I would be in touch through proper legal channels to resolve the matter. I folded the note and put it in an envelope, writing Emily and Jordan on the front. Then I took my suitcase and walked down the hallway to Madison's room. She had finished her cereal and returned to her bedroom to play with her toys. Madison, I said softly, kneeling down to her level. Grandma needs to go away for a little while. Her small face crumpled. Because of the fighting? No, sweetheart, I assured her, gathering her small hands in mine. Sometimes adults need some time and space to figure things out, but I want you to know something very important. I looked directly into her eyes, wanting to be sure she understood. I love you very, very much. That will never change, no matter where I am. She threw her arms around my neck, hugging me tightly. Promise you will come back. I promise that you and I will always be in each other's lives. I said carefully, not wanting to make a promise about returning to this house that I might not be able to keep. And we will see each other again soon. I held her for a long moment, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small wooden heart that Frank had carved years ago. This is very special to me, I told her. My husband, your grandfather, made it with his own hands. I want you to keep it safe for me until we see each other again. Madison took the small heart reverently. I will keep it under my pillow, she whispered. With one last hug and kiss, I left her room, my heart breaking, but my resolve firm. Downstairs, Emily and Jordan were still in the kitchen, speaking in hushed, urgent tones that stopped abruptly when they saw me descending the stairs with my suitcase. Mom, Emily said, her voice rising in disbelief. What are you doing? Exactly what you suggested, I replied calmly. Finding other living arrangements. Now wait a minute, Jordan began, suddenly backpedaling. We did not mean right this second. We can discuss this like adults. I placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. This contains the information you will need regarding the financial aspects of our arrangement. My attorney will be in touch. Emily's face had gone pale. Perhaps she had not truly believed I would leave, or perhaps she was just now realizing the financial implications of their ultimatum. Mom, do not be hasty. Let us talk about this. We have talked enough, I said simply. You have made your priorities clear, and now I am making mine clear. I will not be treated as a servant in a home I helped pay for. I will not enable a relationship dynamic that I believe is unhealthy. And most importantly, I will not participate in modeling that dynamic for Madison. I walked to the door feeling strangely light, despite the heaviness in my heart. Before leaving, I turned back one last time. I love you, Emily. That has not changed. When you are ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, I will be there. But I cannot and will not continue like this. With those words, I walked out the door to my car, placed my suitcase in the trunk, and drove away from the house without looking back. As I turned onto the main road, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for what had been lost. Pain at leaving Madison. Disappointment in my daughter's choices. But underneath it all, a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, I was choosing myself. I drove to a modest hotel a few miles away, checked in for a week, and then sat on the edge of the bed in my quiet room. I took out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Sarah," I said when she answered. "I need to cancel our lunch today, but I was wondering if I could come over and talk. Something important has happened." "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "My door is always open for you. Carol, are you okay? You sound strange." I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? No, not entirely. I was hurt. Disappointed and suddenly homeless in my late 50s. But beneath all that there was something else, something I had not felt in a very long time. A sense of standing up for myself, of refusing to be diminished. "I will be okay," I answered finally. For the first time in a while, I think I actually will be. For the first few days, after leaving Emily and Jordan's house, I stayed in Sarah's guest room. Her cozy two-bedroom apartment became my sanctuary as I tried to make sense of everything that had happened and figure out my next steps. Sarah had been my friend for over 20 years, ever since we both volunteered for the same school fundraiser when Emily was in 3rd grade. She was divorced childless by choice and fiercely independent. Her immediate response when I showed up at her door with my suitcase and told her the whole story was characteristic of her straightforward nature. "Those ungrateful little snakes," she had declared, ushering me inside. "Taking your money and then treating you like the help. Well, you are staying with me until we figure this out." That first night, we sat on her balcony with glasses of wine looking out at the city lights. "You know what amazes me," I said. "How calm I felt when I left. I thought I would fall apart, but instead I felt this strange sense of, I do not know, almost relief." "That is because you finally stopped accepting their mistreatment," Sarah replied. "There is power in standing up for yourself, even when it hurts." By the 3rd day of my stay, my phone was filling up with messages from Emily. The first few were angry. "I cannot believe you just walked out like that. So dramatic, Mum. Jordan says you are manipulating us." Then they shifted to guilt. "Madison cries every night asking for you. How could you abandon your granddaughter this way?" Finally, they moved to pleading. "Mum, please come home. We can work this out. I miss you. The house does not feel right without you." I listened to each message, but did not return the calls. I needed time and space to think clearly without being pulled back into their orbit of manipulation. I had spent months accommodating, compromising, shrinking myself to fit into their expectations. Now I needed to remember who I was without those constraints. On my 5th day at Sarah's, I met with my attorney David Greenfield, who had handled the legal agreement when I contributed to Emily and Jordan's home. Fortunately, we drafted that agreement very carefully, David said, reviewing the documents. You have a clear case for either the return of your financial contribution or the enforcement of your residency rights. They cannot have it both ways. I do not want to go back there, I said firmly. Not under those conditions. I would rather get my investment back and start fresh. David nodded. That is probably wiser. Family legal disputes can get ugly, especially when they drag on. A clean financial separation might be best for everyone. As we discussed options, David mentioned something that caught my attention. You know, my wife was just telling me about a small bookstore for sale downtown. The owner is retiring after 30 years. Given your background at the library, it might be something worth looking into if you are considering what to do next. The idea took root immediately. I had always loved books, had majored in English literature before marrying young and putting career aspirations aside to raise Emily. My job at the library had been deeply satisfying but limited in scope. The thought of having my own bookstore, creating a space filled with stories and ideas, made my heart beat faster with excitement. Do you have the details? I asked David. The next day, Sarah accompanied me to see the bookstore. It was a charming space on a tree-lined street with large windows, wooden shelves reaching to the ceiling, and a small reading nook with comfortable chairs. The current owner, Margaret, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and bright eyes, gave us a tour. I have loved every minute of my 30 years here, she told us. But my arthritis is making it difficult to manage the stairs to the storage room, and my children live out of state. I want to sell to someone who will love it as much as I have. As I walked through the store, running my fingers along the spines of books, breathing in the particular scent of paper and binding glue, I felt a sense of rightness, of possibility. This could be my next chapter. I am very interested, I told Margaret, but I need to resolve some financial matters first. How soon are you looking to sell? I am in no rush for the right buyer, she assured me. Take the time you need. A week after leaving Emily and Jordan's house, I was grocery shopping at the local market when I ran directly into Emily and Madison near the produce section. My heart clenched at the sight of my granddaughter, who spotted me immediately and broke free from her mother's hand. "Grandma!" Madison cried, running to me and wrapping her small arms around my legs. "I missed you so much. I kept your heart safe under my pillow just like I promised." I knelt down to hug her properly, tears threatening to spill. "I missed you too, sweetheart. So very much." Emily stood awkwardly a few feet away, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. I stood up, keeping one hand on Madison's shoulder. "Hello, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "Mum," she replied. Then after a pause, "How are you? Where are you staying?" "I am with Sarah for now, but making arrangements for something more permanent." I kept my tone neutral, neither warm nor cold. Emily shifted uncomfortably. "Jordan feels terrible about what happened. We both do. We never meant for you to actually leave. What did you think would happen when you gave me an ultimatum?" I asked quietly, conscious of Madison listening. "Can we talk about this properly?" Emily lowered her voice. "Maybe coffee sometime this week, without Madison or Jordan present." I considered her request. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect myself from being drawn back into their manipulation. But another part, the mother in me, could see the uncertainty in Emily's eyes. Perhaps there was an opening here, a chance to help her see what her marriage had become. "All right," I agreed. "Text me when you're available." As Emily and Madison prepared to continue their shopping, Madison looked up at me with her innocent eyes. "Are you coming home soon, Grandma?" Before I could answer, Emily quickly intervened. "Grandma is taking some time for herself right now, sweetheart, like a vacation." "But she is coming back, right?" Madison persisted. I met Emily's gaze over Madison's head. "We will see each other again very soon," I promised Madison, "just not in the same house for now." As they walked away, Madison turning to wave until they rounded the corner, I felt both the pain of separation and the certainty that I had made the right decision. Whatever came next, it needed to be on very different terms. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call from Diane, my former neighbor from the street where Frank and I had lived for so many years. We had stayed in loose contact since I moved. "Carol," she said without preamble, "I thought you should know what I just heard. Tina's daughter Allison works at the same firm as your son-in-law, and apparently there is some office gossip going around." "What kind of gossip?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Apparently Jordan hired a housekeeper after you left, but he just fired her after only 5 days. Allison overheard him complaining to a colleague that the woman was incompetent and could not follow basic instructions about how to properly iron a shirt." I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. So he is already going through household help. From what Allison said, he expected this poor woman to be at their beck and call from 6 in the morning until after dinner, all for minimum wage. When she objected, he fired her on the spot. After ending the call, I sat in Sarah's guest room reflecting on this new information. It confirmed what I had already come to understand. The problem had never been me. It was the unhealthy dynamic that Emily and Jordan had created, one that required someone to be permanently in a servile position. I had simply refused to accept that role. But now that I was gone, and with one housekeeper already fired, where did that leave Emily and Madison? The thought troubled me deeply as I prepared for bed that night. Whatever happened next, I knew that my relationship with my daughter and granddaughter was far from resolved. But for the first time in months, I was approaching that relationship from a position of strength rather than submission. 3 months passed with remarkable swiftness. With David's legal assistance, I reached a settlement with Emily and Jordan, rather than engage in a prolonged legal battle. They agreed to return my financial contribution to their home, minus a fair amount for the months I had lived there. The negotiations were handled primarily through attorneys with minimal direct contact between us. I used part of that money as a down payment to purchase Margaret's bookstore. The remainder I set aside for living expenses while I established the business. Sarah had generously allowed me to stay in her guest room during the transition, but I was now renting a small one-bedroom apartment just 2 blocks from my new shop. The grand opening of Second Chapter Books was scheduled for a bright Saturday in early summer. I had spent weeks preparing repainting the walls a warm cream colour, updating the lighting ordering inventory, and creating a children's corner with small chairs and a colourful rug. Margaret had stayed on part-time to help me learn the business operations and introduce me to regular customers. "You have given this place new life," she told me the day before the opening, looking around at the transformed space. "It makes me happy to see it in such good hands." I had sent Emily a formal invitation to the opening, addressing it to the entire family. I had no way of knowing if they would come, but the invitation was a gesture of reconciliation, an open door they could choose to walk through or not. The morning of the opening, I arrived early to make final preparations. Sarah had baked cookies for customers, and a local coffee shop had provided carafes of coffee and tea. I arranged fresh flowers on the counter and straightened the grand opening banner in the window. At exactly 10 o'clock, I unlocked the front door. Within minutes, the first customers began to arrive, many of them friends from the library, former neighbours and curious locals who had watched the store's transformation over the past weeks. At 11:30, as I was ringing up a customer's purchase, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up to see Emily standing there holding Madison's hand. My heart skipped a beat. Jordan was noticeably absent. Madison broke free and ran toward me. "Grandma, you have a store of books." Her excitement was palpable as she looked around the shop with wide eyes. "I do indeed," I replied, coming around the counter to greet them properly. I hugged Madison tightly, then straightened to face Emily. "Thank you for coming." Emily looked different somehow. There was a tension around her eyes that had not been there before, but also something else, a subtle change in how she carried herself. "This place is lovely, Mum. You did all this in just 3 months." "With help," I acknowledged. "Would you like a tour?" "Madison, the children's section is right over there with some comfortable pillows for reading." As Madison eagerly explored the children's books, Emily and I walked slowly through the store. I explained my plans for author events, a book club, and special story times for children. "You seem happy." Emily observed her voice carrying a note of surprise. "I am," I confirmed. Starting over was scary, but it has been the right decision for me. We reached the small seating area at the back of the store, somewhat removed from the other customers. Emily sat down, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Jordan is not with us today because—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "We are separated." The news caught me off guard. "Oh, Emily, I am sorry." She shook her head. "Do not be. After you left, things got worse. Without you there to absorb Jordan's demands, they all fell on me. We went through 2 housekeepers in a month. Nothing was ever good enough for him." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I started seeing our relationship clearly for the first time. I did not like what I saw. "What happens now?" I asked carefully. "I am talking to a lawyer about divorce," she said, her voice stronger. "I have already moved Madison and myself to an apartment. We are managing okay. I went back to full-time at my job." I reached across the small table to take her hand. That must have been a difficult decision. It was, but also not. Emily squeezed my hand. "The day you left, you said something about not wanting to model an unhealthy relationship for Madison. That stuck with me. I kept thinking about what I was teaching my daughter about how women should be treated, about her worth. I did not like the answer." We sat in silence for a moment, the chatter of customers and Madison's delighted exclamations over books, providing a gentle background noise. "I owe you an apology, Mum," Emily finally said. "The way we treated you was inexcusable. I let Jordan's controlling behavior extend to you because it was easier than standing up to him. I am deeply, truly sorry." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, feeling a knot of tension I had carried for months finally begin to loosen. I am sorry, too, that I could not find a better way to address what was happening before it reached that breaking point. "You did try," Emily acknowledged. "I just was not ready to hear it. Sometimes people need to reach their own conclusions, even if it takes longer and hurts more." Our conversation was interrupted by Madison, who came running over with a stack of books clutched to her chest. "Grandma, can I read these here? There is a perfect pillow shaped like a turtle." "Of course you can, sweetheart. This store is meant for reading." As Madison settled in with her books, Emily looked around the shop again. "You have built something wonderful here, Mum. A fresh start." "You have too," I pointed out. "It takes courage to change direction." The grand opening continued throughout the day with a steady stream of customers and well-wishers. Emily and Madison stayed for nearly 2 hours before they needed to leave for a birthday party Madison was attending. At the door, Emily hesitated. "Would it be okay if we came to visit again? Maybe I could bring Madison for your children's story time." "I would love that," I said sincerely. "This door is always open for both of you." After they left, Sarah found me arranging a display of new releases. "Was that Emily I saw earlier?" she asked. "How did that go?" "Surprisingly well." I told her, sharing the news about Emily's separation from Jordan. She is finding her way back to herself. And you? Sarah asked, gesturing to the bustling bookstore around us. Have you found your way too? I looked around at the space I had created at the customers' browsing shelves, and sitting in reading nooks at the life I had built from the ashes of disappointment. I think I have, I replied. It is not the life I expected to have at 58, but maybe it is the one I needed. In the months that followed, I established a new routine. The bookstore thrived, becoming a community gathering place. I hosted weekly story times that Madison never missed. Emily and I rebuilt our relationship slowly with greater honesty and mutual respect. She finalized her divorce from Jordan and gradually reclaimed the strong, independent spirit I had always admired in her. On quiet evenings, I would sometimes sit in my apartment and talk to Frank's photograph, updating him on the day's events. You would be proud of Emily, I told him one night. She found her strength again. And you might be surprised by me too, starting a business at my age. But then again, maybe you would not be surprised at all. You always did say I was stubborn. Sometimes when life forces us to let go of one dream, it creates space for another we never imagined. Walking away from Emily and Jordan's home that Sunday morning had felt like an ending. I could not have known then that it was actually the beginning of something new and wonderful. Not just a second chapter for a bookstore, but for me as well. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation, even though it broke your heart? Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most unexpected blessings. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult circumstances. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, it is never too late to begin again.